Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of. We're calling this patched, or we're calling this. This is the first time we've done this, so it's very special. We're going to do a spoiler cast, and joining me on this spoiler cast is Player 2 editor and a legend, Jess Zammit.
Hi, hello. Big fan of
How
the
are you?
game, as you can
Big fan of
see.
the game, as you see.
Yeah.
You've
Mm.
probably guessed the game by now. There's a whopping big Psychonauts at the bottom of your screen. And also joined is part-time P2er, but he doesn't hang around much anymore, so we occasionally rope him in to do something. Chris Button, how are you, mate?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's nice to be let back into the player two fold. So
You,
yeah,
you never
keen
get
to chat.
out.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
escape.
yeah.
Yeah.
Once you're in, there is no exit.
There's no ex. You're always here. That's life now. Sorry. As you guessed, we're going to talk about Psychonauts 2, and we all played it. Jess did our review on Player 2, but we've all played it through to the end and realized that this is a game that deserves to be talked about. So this is a spoiler cast. We're going to go deep and dirty on this game because there's a lot in this game that really invites discussion. So just to kick things off, to keep it nice and simple, we're going to talk about our general feelings on the game in a broad sense, and we'll start with Jess because she
Mm.
wrote the review for us.
Yeah.
It was an A plus,
Mm.
one of the very few on the website.
Yeah.
Um, Give us the elevator summary for your feelings towards Psychonauts 2.
Um, I liked the first Psychonauts. I thought it had a lot of promise as something that was kind of trying to tackle mental health, and mental illness, I guess, in some forms, in interesting and fun kind of ways. Um, but there were kind of a few parts where it sort of missed the mark for me, and I thought, it's not quite reaching up to what I think it could be. And so I went into the second one kind of mm, with some trepidation, I guess. I was hesitant, and it so quickly just blew all of that out of the water. Like it handles everything that the first thing did so much more maturely and just so much better, I think, than the first one did. And yeah, I mean, I have already talked so much about how much I love it. As you said, it was one of the few A plus scores that has been given on Player Two, and I will stand by that forever because I think, yeah, as a game that deals particularly with like mental health, with the brain, with psychological stuff. For me, it was, yeah, just on this whole other level to anything else that has really kind of tried to go there before. And I think it's so clear how much heart and love and care and thought went into every aspect of getting it right. Um, and the gameplay was good too. The gameplay was fun, and particularly the elements that tied into the themes of it. But I think for something to tackle the themes that it does, which we'll talk about in more detail soon, um, for something to tackle that so well and still be so light and fun and humorous and bright and filled with hope and optimism. Um, yeah, it's just really cool. It's just there's nothing else quite like it that I've ever played, and I'm not sure that there ever will be. So yeah, that's my general feeling.
Chris, how did you feel when you got to those end credits?
Yeah, well, I may as well sign off now because there's nothing I can add to what Jess hasn't already said. But yeah, I felt when those credits rolled, I felt I had played something incredibly special. My history with the Psychonauts series is quite young. My inspiration and sort of desire to play Psychonauts 2, especially coming to Game Pass as well, made me go back to play the original Psychonauts, which I had never played before. So I missed that the first time around. And as someone who loves 3D platformers and grew up playing a lot of the ones on the Nintendo consoles, but never had the original Xbox, going back to play the original Psychonauts was quite the experience. And I was really impressed with how well it held up
Mm.
from a gameplay perspective
Mm.
and from a narrative perspective. And I do totally agree with Jess's review that it incorporated a lot of themes and discussions of mental health that I think were quite advanced for the time and things that other games weren't touching on in any way, shape, or form. And there are a couple of things which I think, Jess, you may have mentioned in the review. There was some of like the asylum sort of aspects of it,
Yeah.
which
Mm.
some of the unfavorable depictions of mental health and mental illness.
Yeah.
But yeah, Psychonauts 2 just took everything that the first did and just takes it to a whole new level. It's really an incredible game, and certainly in a front runner position as one of my games of the year, and possibly one of my favorite games of all time. It's oh yeah, because not only did it cover off all the positive stuff that Jess just mentioned,
Mm.
but it also really really it did a really great job of handling moments of poignancy as well. So there was some truly sad narrative developments, and I didn't feel like any of them were done, you know, purely as a tearjerker, or to try and manipulate your emotions or any of that sort of stuff. It was for a game that's very sort of based in this fantastical and surreal exploration of the human psyche. It's very grounded in
Mm.
humanity, which I think that's something it just does such a wonderful job of. And it's probably one game I'll revisit sooner rather than later, which is something I don't do for many games at all.
Mm.
I think for me, I'm a long-time Psychonauts fan. I played it when it first came out. Being a Tim Schafer guy, I've always been a Tim Schafer guy. Grew up in the PC golden days of Tim Schafer adventures. So it was always going to be a must play for me. And I think what the first game did was it used the brain as a platform and to create crazy levels. And that was kind of the premise. They thought of these crazy levels based on something related to the psyche, and then they built a game around that. I think this time round, what they've done is they've built it with the mental health and the mental well-being aspect as the primary concern, instead of just as a canvas for some crazy levels and some really cool ideas. Like I still think maybe Psychonauts 2 doesn't quite have a level that's as good as the Milkman level in Psychonauts 1. I really, really like the Milkman level. It's just a really cool way, I guess, to show someone that's got a conspiracy theorist mind, I guess. But it didn't really, like, that conspiracy theory didn't tie in with the other minds that were going wrong. Whereas Psychonauts 2 has this very clear theme of healing. Like,
Yeah.
every level, everything you're doing is healing from the start of the game, when you're getting in there and you realize you've made a mistake with your teacher. I forget her name, and you make the mental connection between the risk and reward
Mm.
aspect, uh, and that's where the healing message starts. And from then on, it just follows that through wonderfully. And when you realize that Ford Cruller broke his own psyche to protect himself, and
Mm.
things like that, and they follow that healing all the way through to the end. And I think that's what makes this game so special. It wasn't just a series of ideas where you put a platformer in, which most platformers are, and that's fine. How can we have a cool level? Let's do it.
Mm.
Whereas this had a theme all the way through, and then they built the levels around that theme and the characters around that theme, and I think it just made it something else. Like, a 3D platformer has no right to make you feel like this game did. Mario never made me feel that way. Donkey Kong never made me feel that way. So that's almost as big a shock as,
Mm.
like, as anything else, is that a game in this style can be used in such a way, really. So let's start off. Let's start with that risk, and the new power of the
Mm.
mental connection, and
Mm.
how it's used in game. And a lot of the times it's just used in almost a slightly comedic way, and you can make funny connections and things like that. But when it's used with purpose, like I said, when you change the teacher's mind about her risk and her association of risk with trouble,
Mm.
and danger, that it's just such a clever
Mm.
use of, like, a common term, like a mental connection. You made a connection,
Mm.
and then using that in gameplay. Like that's fantastic, right?
Yeah. And like, so my background, for those who are unfamiliar with me going into this, so I have a background, a degree in psychology. And so that for me was really cool because that's, legitimately a way that you tackle kind of behavioral therapy and trying to change these associations that people have in their minds. And often you're trying to change associations with things that people think are dangerous that are not dangerous. So, in trying to reduce anxiety, for example, this thing is something that someone associates with a scary thing, but why and how can we change that connection? And it's just such a cool idea for a game mechanic.
Yeah.
I wish they had used it more. I mean, it pops up quite a lot in the game. But I wish they had used it as effectively as they did in that its level kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a very good example of a mechanic that so neatly fits in with the theme of the game itself. I love the mental connection power. It's so kind of, to use words that Chris was using before, like grounded in reality, in kind of the way we actually tackle mental health and mental health issues. That gamifying it so effectively was impressive to me, I think.
To create the visual representation of
Yeah.
something that I guess we all do, you know.
Yeah.
What about those early levels? I guess we'll try and I guess keep this in some sort of linear fashion as we talk about things which we'll inevitably jump around in. But what about you, Chris? Those early levels, the casino, the kind of image that the casino was the ideal representation of risk reward sort of thing. Um, the I guess the message that gambling was very easily coming forward about the problems of gambling at the same time as this connection. So, how did you feel they handled that? That could have been very sledgehammerish, I guess, as a way to put it, but it wasn't at all. It didn't get preachy. So,
Yeah, it's funny. And to go on the slightest of tangents, I recently finished watching Squid Game, and I won't spoil anything for those who haven't watched it, but I felt towards the end that started to beat you over the head with its
mm,
message, whereas going to Psychonauts 2, although with a lot of the depictions of its sort of world and people's psyches and that sort of stuff, although it was very surreal and sometimes took some concepts very, very literally
yeah,
in a sort of a visual metaphor sense, I felt like it still did it in a way that was sensitive to all of the topics that were broached. Because and I think a large part of that is due to the writing and dialogue, which is just written with such sensitivity and care for its
mm,
characters and the subject matters involved as well. Um, I can't remember the exact line, but I did remember there was one exchange during the casino level where you're in sort of your teacher's mind.
mm,
I think it was the one where there was it was a big roulette sort of thing where people were trying for a baby or something like that,
yeah.
Mm.
and
It was
there
like a
was some.
pachinko machine or something.
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah. I there was some dialogue there that had me in absolute stitches because of it was sort of the Disney Pixar sort of thing. You know, it's family friendly, but they sneak in these little innuendos or
Mm,
lines that very clearly are meant for an older audience, and um, yeah, the humor as well that it incorporates as part of sort of these messages as well is something that, yeah, it's just yet another layer that Double Fine did just such a
mm.
wonderful job with.
Tim Schafer's listed as the primary writer in the credits,
Mm.
but he has stated he got a lot of help from mental health experts and things like that when they were putting together the game. Like, and it's got Tim's kind of trademarks all over it, like the snappy writing. Like he does games writing kind of like no one else, in that I don't think there's anyone else that's as genuinely as funny as Tim Schafer is when writing for video games. But to do that and keep that humor while tackling mental health issues and stuff was I think it's his finest moment, and that's saying something in a career like his. Um, just keeping that humor that's like genuinely laugh out loud funny, without ever punching down, without ever, even unintentionally seeming like they're you know making fun of someone's mental health at all. Like even the whole idea by the main bad guy, which is Maligula, it's about healing her. It's not about defeating her. From the very start. Yeah, it's just amazing. It just makes you smile to think about it.
Mm.
One of
Oh,
those, yeah, one of those moments that I really appreciated with the writing. I think it was one of my favorite moments and one of the things that has stuck with me since finishing Psychonauts 2. And it's not even that major a point. I think it was the first time that Raz ventured into the like the Psychonauts HQ's psycho isolation
Yep.
chamber. And when he was speaking with the receptionist there, and when they were saying something along the lines of, "Oh, we don't, we only check people in, with their consent, or
Yeah.
only if they're at risk to themselves or others," um, as opposed to something that was perhaps hinted at in the first Psychonauts, and is certainly hinted at in
Mm.
lots of other video games with
mm,
asylum-like settings where people
Yeah.
are, quote unquote, confined or that sort of thing.
yeah,
And it was just a moment of such. Yeah, it was really subtle, and
Yeah.
it didn't feel like it was sort of, a real wink wink nudge at the camera saying, "Oh, look, we're covering all of our mental health bases here."
mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
It just felt like a really genuine moment. Again, as both of you have been saying, this is a game that cares so much for its characters and subject matter, that to include such a small little thing about the consent of psychological treatment, I thought was really, really cool.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think another one of the things that Psychonauts does really well, that's kind of linked to that, is it is about healing, and we talk a lot about mental illness and how it's got themes to do with mental illness, but it's also just kind of about how everybody's psyche is different. And it's not necessarily all just about the bad stuff. It's also about how cool is this person's mind and this person's mind,
Mm.
and we all think differently, and the way that people's minds kind of manifest that is so different. And I think it does a really good job of seeing kind of the humor in not just in mental illness and not just seeing the light in that, but just in general thought patterns of people, and kind of celebrating those differences. And that's where some of the humor comes in as well. Is that it's interesting and cool, and obviously, like, I'm a kind of nerd for brains, because my psychology background, but it's just so cool to see something that so clearly sees, and to see a writer who so clearly sees how interesting the mind can be, and
Mm.
instead of taking the easy path that a lot of games have taken before, and like you said, sort of punching down, or like, oh, how weird is it that everybody thinks differently, like, this is different to me, so it
Yeah.
mustn't be okay. There's just none of that in Psychonauts. It's so very like, we want everybody to just be the best version of themselves, and
Mm.
that might not look like the best version of someone else, but as long as they can be happy and live the way that they want to live, that's kind of the goal, which is the goal of therapy and psychology. It's never to change or fix as such someone. It's to help people live like happy, healthy,
Yeah.
fulfilling lives. And it's very cool to see a game see that, because it's done so badly so often. Like you said, with the asylum settings and people being confined, and treatment is often portrayed as being like a bad thing that people are kind of forced to do and trying to escape
That
and whatever.
almost horror image
Yeah,
of an asylum has been
yeah,
like immortalized in Hollywood well before like video games ran with it.
yeah,
um so it's very easy to make that assumption or that association because it's been, I guess, perpetrated in the media so much,
yeah, yeah.
and for something to steer so clear of that and
Mm,
show that there's nothing wrong with getting help, and there's and your help's going to be different to their help, and their help's going to be
mm,
different to your help, sort of thing. And yeah, it's very, very very conscious of making the right image, you know, and
Mm.
presenting that mental health is important, and it's not something that's taboo, not something that's scary. You know, it's something to be approached with care and thoughtfulness, but it
Yeah.
shouldn't be a scary experience.
I think
The
it kind of
best,
sets a new bar for how things can, be portrayed. And it gives me hope for
absolutely.
how it will be portrayed kind of going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best in the game, I think the best example, there's a lot of really good examples of
Mm.
individual psyches in it, but I
Mm.
think the one that I really, really liked was the librarian
Mm.
level, and how she had almost different, they weren't different personalities, but they were the type of person she needed to be at that point in her life. I thought
Yeah.
that was such a fantastic way to represent it, and she couldn't move forward until like she kind of came to terms with her past and what she'd done in the past, and that's how she managed to move forward. And I thought that was such a cool idea and way to represent it as these four different people, even though they're the same person, just at that point in their life. I thought that was just a really, really cool way of showing that, and we've all done it, you know. I'm a different person to was at 18, you know, so
Mm.
it's such a really cool way to represent that, and how, you know, something went a little bit bad, and so she almost became a person to stop that
Yeah.
bad from happening, even though that's probably not the healthiest way to be. So, yeah, I thought that was just so clever and so very cool.
Like, even not even necessarily just at different times in your life. Like, people present differently in different situations. So you have
Yeah,
like a work you and a friendship circle you and like different friendship circle versions of you and like a you have to be in different situations. And yeah, it was a cool way to represent that too.
very cool. Yeah. Uh, I'm gonna. Okay, this is the real spoilery part, and I know Jess.
Mm.
In the embargo details, you were specifically told not to talk
Mm.
about this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's the Psy King.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
who it took me ages, and it starts off as this little glowing ball that you follow around, and I and you know there's kind of notes of familiarity in the voice, and you just, and it's kind of distorted because this spark of life is almost faded out completely and almost not there. And then as it grows stronger and it grows stronger and it grows stronger, and you go, holy shit, that's Jack Black.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it is just about the best thing he's ever done. Like, I
Mm.
like Jack Black a lot. I think he's a cool cat. But
Mm.
this was just a fabulous performance. As not only like this kind of, he was one of the original Psychonauts. He was a gay man.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Uh, and it was presented in such a wonderful, lovely way in his levels of this psychedelic Pink Floyd era rock circus thing.
Yeah.
It was just brilliant. I just that was when I sent Jess a message straight away and said, "Holy shit, the Psy King!"
Yeah.
You know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Did you
Yeah, it
get
was
that
hard when I
too,
was playing
Chris?
it and I couldn't talk about it with anybody. They were like, "You can't,
Yeah.
you can't talk about the sucking." I was like, "Oh." Yeah.
Did that hit you the same, Chris?
Yeah, the Psy King was absolutely my favorite part of the game by far, and that's saying something for a game just chock filled with highlights,
Yeah.
highlight after highlight after highlight. Um, yeah, the photo mode got such a workout because it's of the slight cell shading, all the psychedelic colors and
Yeah.
sounds, and the sheer vibrancy. I'm a sucker for pretty colors, so
Mm.
that had me hook, line, and sinker.
Mm.
But yeah, then Jack Black's performance and his song as well, and the development of the character sort of finding himself again. Oh my goodness, that was really special. I'm a bit lost for words really because
Yeah.
it was such a wonderful mash of gameplay and level design and just everything really.
Yeah, the bit where they're like, there's kind of the constellations, and you see like the
Mm,
yeah
Yeah.
stars in the sky, and he's kind of discovering himself, and yeah.
And it's also the same time you kind of find out for sure, like you have suspicions up until then, but you find out that Maligula is
Mm,
was their friend. She was the seventh Psychonaut,
yeah.
Ford Croller's love, and that's the kind of point that it's confirmed for you, and it's done in such a really special way as he's rediscovering himself, and it's at the same time providing that kind of essential exposition to the whole
Mm.
story.
It gives so
Uh,
much context and like explains why they are all like they're kind of not scared of her so much. It's more of like a touchy subject. They're like,
yeah,
oh, we're not scared to like fight this evil. They're all very much approaching it with like a
we want to
no, we
help
have
you.
to yeah.
Yeah.
Um things are about to go bad, but not necessarily in a like oh, we must kill the evil kind of way. Um it's such a cool, nuanced way that the characters respond to Maligula and the whole
Mm.
situation. Because yeah, you're right. Clearly, they're so just filled with care for this person,
And they remember they remember Lucy. They don't
Lucy.
remember
Yeah.
Maligula. And then Helmet. So the Psy King's story
Mm,
takes another turn in when you take a dive into his partner's mind,
mm,
who's which
yeah.
was another amazing level that deals with grief in a
That. Yeah.
wonderful way. That basically, essentially, the mind is protecting itself from the
Mm,
grief, and instead of facing that grief, and it's shut him away, and forced him to be an alcoholic or
mm,
whatever the case may be, and that representation that the grief was that seed that could grow and cripple him.
yeah.
I thought that was just once again just an amazing way to visualize
Yeah.
complex mental concepts.
That level was the one. Like I loved the Psy King's
Yeah,
story and his level, but the level of his partner was the one that really cemented it for me. That I was like, this is so special. This is not like anything I have ever played because it's so clear what the issue is, and
mm,
it's so clear what he's grappling with, but never does it really say like, oh, he was an alcoholic. It's
no,
just that his brain is filled with bottles and like rivers of
mm,
alcohol, and those are kind of the obstacles that you're overcoming without it explicitly stating it. And it was just oh such a powerful way to deal with that and with grief at the same time, and to have this like beautiful love story kind of woven in with it, and this relationship is so special to him and they're so happy together, and even that is not enough to kind of pull him all the way through. I think it was just such
yeah,
a complex way to approach that, because so often it's like, oh, but so many things in your life are right and you have all this good stuff, and people kind of blame themselves for the fact that their partner is struggling with whatever. And it was very, very cool, the nuanced kind of complex way they approach that, of like, yeah, he does have these beautiful, wonderful things in his life that clearly are so important, that he loves so much and wants to do well and do right, but is so affected by his past and his grief and all this other stuff that's going on, that it's hard for him to kind of be all in that, no matter how important it is. And it just I know I didn't expect the queer representation that the game gave. I
yeah.
didn't see it coming. I didn't expect it, and it was beautiful. And yeah, it was
For me,
amazing.
I always notice. It's funny. I always notice queer representation when it's not beaten over your head.
Mm,
Like I feel like in an attempt to be more representative, some games go too far, or some media goes too far to say, "Hey, look, we've got representation."
mm,
Whereas in no way did this feel shoehorned in. It felt wonderfully natural and
mm,
inclusive, and it really well put into the game without ever feeling like we're just ticking a diversity box here.
yeah,
Which is, I think, makes it just amazing, and it's something I always notice and think, you know what, well done. That's how
mm,
you do it,
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was. Yeah, it's beautiful, and the relationship between the two characters when they interact. So you see moments from their past, and
yeah,
that kind of informs it. But again, spoilers. But we already know we're doing
yeah.
that. But when they interact again, it's just they're like, I'm in
And he's
love with
in
your
Nick's
mind, and
body.
he's
Yeah,
in. Yeah, he's in the
yeah.
body of a
Of
guy voiced
Nick.
by Elijah Wood.
Yeah.
Um, um,
who ends up
Yeah,
being
and
the
it's
real bad guy.
yeah, yep. So it's just lovely. It's so well done.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
And one thing further to what you were saying, Jess, about the depiction of Helmet's struggles and suffering and grief is that the way it's depicted, and not just for Helmet, but for various other characters who struggle with various other issues or vices or whatever it may be. It's done in such a, or it's presented in such a non-judgmental way as well. It's clearly depicting these people are struggling with something, and it's impacting themselves, it's impacting their relationships, and impacting others. But it's never suggesting this person is a bad person or they are bad for feeling this way, or even as we've been saying the whole time about the Psychonauts relationship with Maligula or Lucretia, is that they don't see her as a bad person. They just saw her as someone who was really sort of a victim of circumstance and how that all unfolded. And I think it's really lovely to show that yes, these people are struggling and they need help, but it's important to do so with a lens of empathy and for care for these people, that um, we don't necessarily think less of them for how some of their struggles have manifested in various ways. It's more again, how can we help them, or this is just their reality, without saying, oh, this person's an alcoholic and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that's a that's a big no, that sort of thing. I really liked how sensitively a lot of those subjects were depicted, and the fact that people are not beyond redemption. People people deserve love and care and health and help, which is so true in real life.
I really liked how they took Ford Cruller, who was kind of this comedic face in the first game. You knew him as this amazing psychonaut, but Raz was basically the only one that knew he was there at any point, and he had these different personalities unless he brought the bacon out. Um, and it was kind of just more comedy, I guess, than anything in that first game. But then to find out in this game that the reason he was like that, why he was so fractured, was he'd done it to himself on purpose. Um, and then you realize that the jobs that these representations of Cruller were all related to his life with Lucy, and that was just a wonderful touch, and a way to fill out a character returning. Like we got to see lots of Sasha, and we got to see lots of Agent 9 in the first game, but we didn't really know anything about Ford Cruller. And in this game, you get to know him and realize what an amazing, like, you can see why he was the amazing Psychonaut and why he was kind of the lead of it all. Um, and that concept that he's looking after the bowling alley because he took Lucy for a date on bowling, or that's just it brings a smile. Like, there's no, I guess, ulterior uh, message there except that it's nice. And nice, it can be good. That's just a nice thing. And that was the, like, when you realize Ford has fractured his mind, that was the first real oh my god moment for me in the game. And then it just kind of, from there on, went crazy ramp up, and every time I turned around, every level, I was just like going, holy shit, they topped it, and then they topped it. And I played the preview before the game came out, and played up to the end of the casino level, and then they gave me the library level as well in the preview, and I had no context for the library level. So um, I don't think I ended up finishing the library level. I played the first part a lot because it was in order, and then it kind of felt like, hey, I shouldn't be playing this now, and I'm glad I kind of didn't, because without all that context, it's just a platforming level.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's just,
Yeah.
It's that sort of game, isn't
yeah.
it?
Mhm. Yeah,
it
it's like
gives
I
me
want to
this,
say everything about it and nothing about it so people can experience it, but I want to tell them why they should and why it's so good, but
yeah.
it's just
Well,
so
that's the
hard to
point
put
of the
into
spoiler
words.
cast, right?
Yeah,
People that have either played it are going to listen to us and tell us we're all wrong, or
they can try, but they will not convince me.
yeah, it fills me with such hope
Mm,
that Microsoft in there, like we're talking games industry, I guess, for a little bit
mm,
right now. Microsoft have bought Double Fine,
mm,
and not only did they allow them to make this, they enabled them to make this because Tim's been very clear that had they not had Microsoft support, it would be a much smaller concept, a much smaller
mm,
game. Um, to think a big publisher of any type, shape, or form is happy to
yeah.
fund this to you know put it out in the world, and this, they're happy to support Senua's sacrifice, and that's another depiction of mental health that would be really interesting to see,
Mm,
because the first one was
yeah.
astounding.
Yeah.
So it makes me happy to see that publishers are willing to do this, and I know Microsoft's got more money than God, but
Mm,
they still have to justify these decisions, and I think Tim Schafer repaid them and Double Fine repaid them with this game tenfold. I don't think anyone can ever criticize Double Fine for not being an individual and not being
mm,
themselves, even though they now are owned by Microsoft.
mm. Yeah. That it didn't lose any of the personality of the first one. It
No.
only I can only see growth from the
Yeah.
first one. I yeah. Like I said, I liked the first one, but it's just I felt the gameplay was so much more polished.
Yeah.
The themes were tackled with so much more maturity, and it's not that the maturity wasn't there in the first one. It's just that I felt it so strongly. The
Mm,
amount of thought that had been put into every bit of the second one, and it's just clearly a labor of love. But I'm so glad that they had that backing to make this labor of love.
mm.
Um, yeah, no,
And
I'm
Tim's very clear on doing sequels. He doesn't do them
mm,
very often.
mm,
The Monkey Island series is probably the only really notable exception. Costume Quest is made by Double Fine, but Tim doesn't have anything to do with that
mm,
series. So he's usually the type of developer that likes to move on to the next thing. But for him to come back and do this, especially it was only a cult game. It never
mm.
set the world on fire in terms of sales. Um, yeah, and just to knock it out of the park, like just huge. I expected it to be good. I
Mm.
didn't expect it to change platform games forever, and
Yeah,
I
it
think that's what
definitely
it's done.
tackles levels in a way that no other game does. I mean, the first one, but
Yeah.
no other series is quite as inventive. I think in their level design.
All right, we might touch on one last thing before we finish up, and that's Raz's growth.
Mm,
Raz himself. So for most of the game, Raz, and for the first game, Raz is your protagonist, and you don't really get to see what's going on behind the curtain with Raz until almost the second last level in this one, and you get the family circus
mm,
level, and I thought that was and you think Raz, and that kind of level almost twists that just that little bit, and there's a couple of little things that you didn't realize about his family, and I thought that was really nice little break before things got very serious again, and it was
mm.
kind of this light before the dark moment in the game. But how do you like Raz? Do you like Raz and the growth he's taken? Because there's clearly a different person from when he started.
Yeah, I do like Raz as a character. I warmed to him pretty quickly when
Yeah.
I started playing the first game. Is Yeah, even though he's depicted as quite a young character, I'm not sure how old is he? Is he like
10.
preteen or teen
And
or yeah,
10.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, very much a mature head on young shoulders, but still with some of that sort of youthful perspective and that sort of thing. But I think one thing I've really liked about Raz's character all the way through is that he is such an empathetic character. He he's he always looks out for others, and he's very 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 sensitive in the way that he speaks with people. And I think it goes back to the point I was saying earlier about the non-judgmental and empathetic lens that Psychonauts 2 is viewed through. And I think a lot of that is because it's sort of, even though it's like a third person platformer game, a lot of it is seen through the eyes of Raz. And I think that's a big reason why I like the game and the series so much, is because he is such a positive and empathetic character to sort of, absorb the world through. And I think, the whole story about his relationship, his fractured relationship with his family, in particular his mother, and sort of, obviously his relationship with his dad was mended towards the end of the first game. So now it's dealing with the rest of the family and sort of figuring, okay, what led to Raz running away, or what are some of the complications here. And obviously there's some conflict for him to deal with and work through. And it's stuff that, despite a game being about psychics who are able to jump into other people's minds, it's all very human. It's all very grounded conflict, because it's a sort of thing that people can relate to, who may have estranged relationships with members of their families, or friendships and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's really really interesting the way that it does that. And again, sort of for him dealing with the reveal of sort of what Ford Cruller did to sort of Lucy or Nonna, however you want to view it at that particular point of the game. He's obviously dealing with a lot of things that have shattered his worldview,
Yeah.
or sort of his upbringing up to that point. But yeah, he's clearly not happy about it. But gee, for a 10-year-old, or however old he is in Psychonauts 2, he deals with it very maturely.
Yes. I really like the point right at the start where he realizes he's done the wrong thing in changing that person, in changing his teacher's mental connection. And and it wasn't like, and it wasn't in a preachy, play school sort of way. He's going, you could see he was having, should I do this? Should I do this? And then he did it and kind of went, I shouldn't have done that. And I've got to fix this, and I've really got to fix it now. And then his conversation with her about it, and revealed she'd done the same thing when her research was stolen as a doctor. And that was that kind of life lesson sort of. And I thought at that point in the game, I thought, oh, that's a nice, moral life lesson sort of thing. And I thought that was probably the trajectory of the game, but it took it so much further from then. That was just the cup of tea before dinner sort of thing.
I think for me, so Raz, particularly at the beginning of the first one, Raz is exactly the protagonist I usually hate. He's kind of like obnoxious. He like forces his way into the situation in this very like, I'm better than all of you. I'm naturally talented. How good am I? Like this, and it just really rubs me the wrong way. But I think in the second one, particularly considering at the beginning, he so quickly has that like kind of wake up call where he is now no longer
In the
what he
real
is,
world.
as being like, big fish in a small pond, whatever. He's suddenly among all these people that are far more sort of skilled and familiar with what he's trying to do. So it kind of grounds him a little bit, brings him kind of back a step, and I think from then on he's much more, for me, he was much more likable. I think the interesting thing about his relationship with his family is that a lot of the language that they use around his parents' feelings towards him being like to being having psychic abilities, and different members in the family like maybe having that too. It's a lot of the same languages they use when it's like someone is coming out, and like your family are kind of, how are they going to react to finding out about that part of you, and how does that change the family dynamics? So I guess for me, seeing it through that lens, like it was a very familiar. I mean, like I've been very lucky in my situation, but for a lot of people, it's that it creates those fractures. And I think because that was the way it was familiar to me, it was really easy for me to relate to that like, oh, you have to kind of hide part of yourself, and then it's, you know, you don't have to hide it anymore, but some members of your family are going to be okay with it and some aren't going to be, and even if they are okay with it, they're not necessarily, it's like, okay, that's a part of you, but we don't talk about it. Like, it's, yeah, it was a lot of the same kind of themes and approaches and language that we would use talking about that. And I just thought that was kind of cool. I don't know, maybe other people will interpret it differently, but I yeah, it
Yeah,
was
absolutely can see that. Um, and the Nonna or Lucy or whoever you want to, her being the one that kind of forces him to go and follow, you know, what he wanted
mm,
to do and go to psychic camp and then become the psychic. I thought that was just
mm,
a, you know, like showing that this Lucy character was a wonderful person, even though she wasn't quite herself then and she didn't really
mm,
know her own background. It was still
mm,
there, and I thought that was very very nice touch in the family relationship. And there's just one little thing I want to mention quickly. The representation of the baddies in the
mm,
game. So
mm,
there's enemies that pop up that you have to. It's a platformer, you know. You got to hit something, right? But the old ones like the sensors are back with their big stamp, and that was a good representation back then. But the new ones, I think the panic attack, in that you almost have because the way to beat the panic attack is to slow everything down and
mm,
use the slowdown power, and that's how you beat it. And
mm,
and like that's how you beat a panic attack in real life. You need to slow everything down. You need to take a deep breath. And I think the way they use the powers to combat the enemies in the game it's so clever how they've created these powers that are, you know, there's a real life counterpart to them, and there is as an analog to be drawn between the way you would treat this in real life as you would in the game. The bad mood bad guy, for example, you know, you had
mm,
to find out what was causing the bad mood and then treat that, you know. So I thought that was very cool. I'm sure Jess will
mm.
have.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%, I agree. I think it would be so easy to, again, go like step wrong with
Yeah,
this sort of stuff, but they do such a good job. Yeah, the bad mood is the one that I really liked.
yeah,
Um, that, yeah, you kind of have to get to the root of the problem before you
yeah,
can actually defeat it, because otherwise
yeah,
it's just going to keep coming back and keep causing issues. Or like the enablers, I really like the
yeah.
enablers as well.
The
Um,
running around cheering.
yeah, running around cheering. Um, yeah, and you know, you have to deal with them before you can kind of
Deal with the
deal with
problem.
the things that,
Yeah,
yeah, they're enabling, and it's very very clever. I love their approach to enemies.
yeah. They're all, and it doesn't take much thought.
Mm,
Even a non-psych nerd like myself,
mm.
they didn't have to hit me over the head with it to get the point.
No.
That's a sign of good writing, you know, because I don't think anyone's going to miss the point at all after playing the game.
Mm,
All right, we're getting to the end here. I'll give everyone one last chance. Sing
mhm.
praises. Talk about something that we've missed. Have I forgotten something that I should have brought up?
No, I mean, it's just so good. It's just all so good. It's like the gameplay is good. The way the gameplay ties into the themes is good. The themes are then good. Like, the
Mm,
characterization is amazing. The writing is amazing. It's just such a combination of all of these things that work so well together, that I think is really hard to achieve in the way that they have done. And it's just so impressive to me. This game is just so impressive and so special. Um, and again, I am like you. I expected to like it, but I didn't expect it to be this. I didn't expect to love it like I do.
mm.
But this game is going to stick with me, you know, forever. It very quickly became one of my favorite games, and yeah, I can't wait to play it again.
Chris?
I mean, again, Jess has summed it up extremely well. I think really the only thing I'll add to Jess's thoughts is that it's one of those experiences that reminds you of why we love the medium of video games, because of all of these separate elements of gameplay, of script writing, of music, dialogue, story, visuals, everything, just the way it all combines to make something greater than the sum of its parts, even though the sum of its parts are incredible to start off with.
Mm.
It's just a special game. And I think probably one other thing I will mention is that it's quite common when I'm playing a single player game, or a game that's got sort of a story focus to it, that my partner Laura will sit with me and watch me play, and we'll help sort of brainstorm solutions to things and that sort of thing. And I think she got as much out of the game watching it as I did playing it. It's one of those games where, even if you're not someone who typically enjoys third-person platformers or whatever else, it's a game that you can get a lot out of, whether you're playing it or watching it. It's extremely special, to use the same word over and over again.
I think it is possibly from a small studio like Double Fine, and I know they are owned by Microsoft now, but they are still a small studio. It is possibly the greatest achievement in the triple A space, and it is a triple A game. There is no, like, you can't call this an indie, you know, like, and I think it's as far as approaching such difficult themes, there isn't a game on the planet that has come close. I don't think I would struggle to think of a book that has done it this well, or there's definitely, I don't think, any movies that have tackled anything like this. And I think it's the type of story and the type of approach that only games can take. And it takes some, but at the same time, it still takes someone incredibly brave and incredibly talented, or a group of people that share that vision to do it. And Double Fine have just, I don't know, you can't say enough for this game. You can't say how much of an achievement this game is, on so many levels. And we haven't even talked about the fact technically it runs like butter. It's a stunning looking game. The art style is fantastic. We're just talking about the stuff that made us go wow, but everything else is amazing too. Like, the technical stuff, it runs at 30 frames, 60 frames perfectly. There's no frame rate drops on whatever system you're playing. And you can't say that about many games anyway. So, like, yeah, it just, from any which way you look at this, it is a stunning achievement. And just quickly, further to your point, Chris, about people watching it and enjoying it, Tim was very clear, and the Double Fine team are very clear, as that's why they included the God mode. Basically, you can switch on the God mode and play the game, because in experiencing that is more important than the challenge that comes with experiencing that. So I think that's, in this game particularly, and I don't have any horse in the race for the difficulty argument debate, but for this game, that is the absolute perfect decision, the absolute right way to do things for this game. I think it was such a very smart move to get as many people to see this as possible.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of accessibility in games, and the more options you can provide people to enjoy games the way they want to or are able to, the better. The better everyone is. That's as simple as it is for
Yeah.
me.
Yep. No, I agree 100%.
All
This time
right,
I don't
well,
have anything to add to Chris's words. So
That's all right. We've flipped.
we'll
flipped
start
the
talking
script.
about Dark Souls soon, and yeah.
Oh,
no,
gosh.
then I'm out. I'm leaving.
All right, then. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, as we gushed about Psychonauts 2. Maybe someone will post this to Tim, and he'll send us a nice thank you letter or something. That's a bit. But it was wonderful to talk about it. And like I said at the start, this was a game I felt I had to talk about.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to spoil it for anyone that may experience it, so that's why we're doing a spoiler cast. So,
Yeah.
thank you for joining me, Chris. Thanks for coming on. Where can we find you at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm on various corners of the internet these days, but yeah, Twitter's probably the best place to find me at Bibbyboy, BibbyBhoy, and doing a bit of stuff for Games Hub at the moment. So yeah, and always hanging around the Player Two gang and following closely what the team's doing. It's always good reading and good watching whenever something goes live over there.
Thanks. And Jess, what have you got coming? What have you got
Um.
up? What do you want to
Yeah.
spruik?
It's. I mean. It was a good few weeks of gaming for me when Psychonauts came out. So you can find me on Twitter where I talked a lot about Psychonauts. Or on Player Two where I also talked a lot about Psychonauts. And then I think 2 weeks later, Life is Strange True Colors came out, and I spoke a lot about that too. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter, on Player Two. I think soon I will have some cool stuff coming up in the pipeline. Gonna write about Nickelodeon All Stars Brawl. A little bit of a different feel to this game.
Yeah.
And yeah, got a spooky game in the pipeline too, which is always fun. So yeah, Twitter is probably the best place to keep up to date with everything I'm doing.
Cool. And you can find me at Huso81 or at Player2AU. I've got a piece up about, I guess, lethargy and getting sick of the screen thanks to lockdown, which is my latest opinion piece. But as always, there'll be lots of reviews and gibberish that I publish. Being the editor, no one can tell me no. So probably should at times, but they don't.
No.
Thanks, guys, and thank you for joining us. And we hope this probably won't be the last of this sort of thing. It's fun to do. So, and that's why we do it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.